Thanks so much. I really appreciate the invite, and I have to say it's both, I'm happy and intimidated to follow Dr. Gray's presentation because I sat in the audience, and for some things I was like, well, I feel like we're doing a good job, and for others I'm like, I don't know if we're having enough impact. And so I have to say here I want to give an acknowledgement as well. I'm a new national program leader for food safety. I've been with ARS for 15 years, but I've been a national program leader since October. And so a lot of these projects that I'll talk about today were actually kind of formulated and overseen by Dr. James Lindsay, and he's been a national program leader with ARS for over 20 years. So I wanted to start out front saying I won't claim any responsibility for any of this. That's my disclaimer. Okay, so ARS is the intramural research branch of the USDA, and our scientists conduct research to address questions of high national priority in agriculture. And of course, food safety is one of the highest priorities in USDA. And in our national program, we try to assess, control, and hopefully eliminate foodborne contaminants. And so those are, of course, your pathogenic bacteria, viruses, and parasites, but it's also chemical contaminants, toxins. So the program, as was stated before, is a very broad program that requires many different disciplines of scientists working on it. And our program has really moved beyond just your routine prevalence and surveillance. This was kind of a critical area for many years just because we were trying to understand what was going on. Now we're trying to address these, as with many other groups as we heard earlier, these complex questions that require creative thinking and crossing conventional boundaries. And our scientists are being required to think in a systems-oriented, interdisciplinary way about the work that they're doing. And we, as a program, think about our program in this kind of fashion. We look at addressing food safety issues from production through consumption. We don't look at pre-harvest and post-harvest as completely different realms. These are along a continuum, and we know that if we do something that affects one phase, that's going to have downstream effects. But we're very lucky as a government agency to have intramural infrastructure and extensive expertise in our scientists. We are able to conduct long and short-term studies. We work in the field, on the farm, and in the lab. So we have a lot of capability to address food safety issues. So the question is, why do we work with our partners? What are the value that we get from working with other groups? And I would say we are able to accomplish goals that are sometimes beyond the scope of what we can do in-house. It broadens their ability to do the cutting-edge priority research that we do and extends their expertise. And because of this, it helps us to manage our resources. So we're not having to continuously buy new instrumentation, bring in new expertise. And I am actually of the camp of, I think these multidisciplinary collaborations are very important. They bring a new way of thinking among the scientists, and I do think that often these collaborations result in more than the sum of the parts, and also keep our scientists from thinking in a silo. So, if you work in one research group or you work in one discipline, this really makes you, working with other people coming from other organizations that have different ways of thinking, this really makes you think outside of your box. And there's a real value for our stakeholders in that. And then ARS, I wanted to mention here, also works in project cycles. So we have 5-year project planning cycles that we go through, and actually the Food Safety National Program is at the end of its 5-year cycle. So right now we're writing up our retrospective, and we put together the accomplishments from all of our food safety scientists over the last 5 years. And we go to our stakeholders, and these are very broad. We have commodity groups, public health groups, and regulatory groups, and we send out this retrospective and have them comment on that and say, these are where you've really accomplished the goals, and these are the priorities that we're looking at in the next 5 years. And I can't stress enough how many different groups we try to talk with and how we pay attention to what those priorities are so that we are sure that our scientists are working to address not only today's issues, but the future issues as well. So today I'll talk about 3 programs, and as I said, James Lindsay has been a national program leader with ARS for many years, and so 2 of these that I'll talk about, one I would consider it an international collaboration. COMBASE is, and I do have to say, actually talking about the long-term nature, especially for me, for successful collaborations, all 3 of these have been going on for 20 years or more. So they're good, successful collaborations. And then we have an ARS academia, or I like to call it a multidisciplinary or collaboration. And then I want to talk about NARMS. So that's the National Antimicrobial Resistance Monitoring System. And I know many, if not most of you, have heard about this group, but I want to talk about it in a little bit of a different way, and that is how this complex interaction between interagency groups who have very different ways of thinking and mandates are able to come together to produce something that's really valuable, I think. So I'll start by talking about COMBASE. This is an international initiative that was started to support food companies, researchers, and policymakers by providing a robust data set that describes food safety and spoilage organisms and how they respond in food environments. And the way that this came about was a group of international scientists and officials came together after, long days of meetings at one of these food safety meetings, and they said, look, we have all of this data. We have all of these disparate sources of where this data is. We have all of this published data, but we don't have it in one place, and it isn't available to everyone. It's just available to those who can get their hands on the data. So a international collaboration was established with James Lindsay at USDA and with the UK Food Standards Agency and the Institute of Food Research, which is in Norwich. And what they were able to do through a lot of working across, the boundaries of different governments and working actually also in collaboration with the EU Commission. And so this was funded by several different groups. There was a strong commitment to making this happen. And they were able to put together this combined database of all of this data that became available to the general public for the benefit of food safety. And I have to say, as with all of these projects over 20 years, this has evolved. It's become an online database, and now it's managed by Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Mark Tamlin, who is with the University of Tasmania Food Safety Center of Excellence, and he's actually here giving a couple of talks on COMBASE if you want to listen to those. So COMBASE is a database with over 7,000 records. An ARS scientist, Dr. Vijay Januja, is actually helped the database to become an online resource, which of course opens it up to many more scientists, and also incorporated predictive models that can be used to look at inactivation and growth of bacteria in foods. There's many registered users across the world, and over 1,000 new data sets were introduced last year. So it's a great resource, and it was one that came together, very much to support the ability of companies to reformulate products and to devise food safety protocols, to look at quantitative risk assessment. And we have a very strong ARS component to the management of this. Dr. Lindsay manages it through the Office of National Programs. We have yearly proposals to support any new, or to justify any new funding. There are annual progress reports, and the PI, the ARS scientist that works on this, produces impact statements to show us what the impact is of the program, and there's a lot of collaborator meetings. There's also a very strong science advisory board, and I think that's also a common theme for these very successful projects. And so this is international and national groups with industry, regulatory groups, and university. They provide feedback on COMBASE, and they also get a lot of input from their users and stakeholders. And another common theme for me, in addition to communication on these, is a common purpose. And so COMBASE is an example of a program that's really changed and evolved over time. The main players have changed. It's gone to being an online data source. But there's always been a common theme of providing a robust data set for the purposes of food safety. So I think it's provided a lot of value to those groups. And now I want to move on to the ARS academic relationship between Eastern Regional Research Center and Purdue Center for Food Safety Engineering. Oh, sorry. The CFSE is directed by Dr. Lisa Maurer, and our ARS PI at ERRC is George Paoli. These groups work very closely together, and what we're able to obtain from this is a unique opportunity for multidisciplinary collaborations between food scientists and the engineers. They have expertise in state-of-the-art facilities that allow them to add a lot of value to the priorities of the project that already exists at ERRC. So they're already ARS priorities. This is just providing value and opportunities to our scientists and to our program. And another value that ARS as a government institution gets from these is we support very strongly student outreach and mentorship. And it's not something that you as a government institution can do very easily. So we really value our collaborations with universities and make that often a priority in what we try to get out of these relationships. And again, we have the common purpose. Advanced engineering principles and microbiology techniques are used to develop new knowledge and technologies to detect and reduce foodborne contaminants. And so that exists across the program at Purdue and our program at ERRC. I wanted to put this up because I think it's impressive, but again, I'm not going to be responsible for being able to explain any of these to you, but I will be very happy to put you in touch with Dr. Maurer at Purdue or George Paoli. But they're doing things that, like molecular printing of biosensing test strips, artificial intelligence, working on nanoparticle-based technology. So these are very advanced engineering technologies that our ARS collaborators have the advantage of being able to work with the university scientists. And it has been an impactful relationship, and so we do measure that at ARS very often, I think maybe too much in terms of publications. We also, as I said, it has a strong outreach component with students, but these are documentation of commercial licenses, material transfer agreement, invention disclosures, and tech transfer is very important to ARS. So these are good documentations of the success of the relationship. And so in terms of the way we monitor oversight and accountability of these projects, this is an example in which this is actually a standard ARS research project. So you see the project title, it's developed, and there's a lead scientist, Dr. Paoli, but the Purdue scientists contribute to that, and they're responsible for providing the impact statements in a yearly report, and they're on a 5-year project planning cycle, just like all the other scientists, and they have projects that are peer-reviewed through ARS's Office of Scientific Quality and Review. And also there's annual meetings between, there's constant meetings between EERC and Purdue, but they also take part in our annual food safety meetings and often meet separately with Dr. Lindsay. And finally, I wanted to talk about National Antimicrobial Resistance Monitoring System. So this is an interagency collaboration between U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the goal of NARMS is to monitor antimicrobial resistance in bacteria commonly transmitted via food by sampling food animals, foods, and clinically ill humans and looking at trends in antimicrobial resistance. And this is a program that really exists in a true One Health framework, and that is why FDA, CDC, and USDA were brought together in this collaboration. And I've only been a part of this for 4 years, and I can say that the One Health framework has really been increased just in the 4 years that I've been a part of it. And what's extraordinary in my mind about this is that it brings together agencies and members with very diverse backgrounds and approaches. So we're regulatory groups and research organizations. We're epidemiologists, veterinarians, molecular biologists, public health officials, and we have not only diverse agencies, but our mandates are very different. And what we have in common, again, is our goal or our approach, which is to embrace an integrated One Health approach to surveillance and research to address the complex, multifaceted problem of antimicrobial resistance. And I'm kind of paraphrasing that from Dr. Karp's et al. Paper, which is celebrating, kind of summarizing the 20th anniversary of NARMS, past, present, and future. I would advise you to take a look. It's very well written. And in my opinion, this is very an enormous value add for public health agencies to have this combined effort, to have the intellectual contribution for so many diverse groups, and to have the resources of the multi-agency collaborations. And we recently had a science advisory board summary, and they stated that this is a model organization for the One Health platform. We have positive working relationships, and this group is respected in terms of one of AMR. What I think is most impressive is how they overcome challenges. And a lot of that is the amount of communication that there are. There are leadership team meetings by month, every other week, and then there are subdivided working groups that meet on a quarterly basis. And what we do is we have very open communications, and we try to come up with a standardized approach or something we can all agree on. And that's not that easy. Another thing I wanted to harp on a little bit, just from my personal experience in working with public health groups, international organizations, and ag commodity groups, is the incredible importance of definitions. And how often I think a lot of issues that arise in working in these collaborative groups comes from not having a true understanding of how one person defines something versus another. And for me, a lot of this has been definitions of environment, on-farm, and agriculture. Those mean very different things to me, and they may not mean something different to some organizations. And I find I overcome a lot of my issues by asking someone, what is your definition of agriculture? They also have a lot of successful program oversight. We go through a 5-year strategic planning, stakeholder meetings, science advisory boards, and I won't dwell on that too much because I wanted to talk a little bit, as I run quickly out of time, about the importance of our agreement process in putting together our collaborations with industry or with the universities. And so these agreements are incredibly important to us in terms of having accountability, being able to have line management and legal departments aware of what's going on, having our financial agreements and oversight and clarity in process and kind of setting our outcomes and expectations. And finally, the way that I think these really enhance our scientific quality is by these mutual beneficial and often really inspirational relationships. The scientists really enjoy these interactions and get a lot of value add out of them. The work that we can do is often intensified, and we get good productivity out of both the ARS scientists and the collaborators. And we really have a pretty strong oversight and communication and reporting requirements from ARS scientists and their collaborators. And we make it clear that when tax dollars are spent, it is required that the data are made publicly available and that reporting is transparent with no biases. And that's, as you heard, kind of written into the law. So I just wanted to thank James Lindsley. Pam Stark-Reed is both my boss and our Science and Integrity Officer. And I've got some resources here that I'll be happy to share with any of you. And I'll be happy to take any questions, although it seems like I ran out of time. Thank you so much.